welcome to a Perfectly Acceptable Podcast. Episode doesn't matter. Jeff and Justin.
Episode X.
Episode X. That's very good. Where Justin and I, we've squirreled ourselves away into a side room so that we can just kind of sit here and talk about the Hickman X-Men books as much as we want and not worry about encroaching on the time frames of a normal podcast. So, for the sake of clarity, right now we're going to be recording this. Powers of 10 number 3 has just come out, which means we've got House of X1, Powers of 10 number 1, House of X2, Powers of 10 number 2, and Powers of 10 number 3 are the 5 issues that have come out so far. Justin, thank you for being here with me.
God, I'm so glad that we decided to do this.
Yeah, weeks ago. This was Justin's idea, actually.
I have just wanted to, I haven't wanted to talk about a book so much. I haven't loved a book so much in so long, but I also am mindful, I come in Wednesday piping hot on this Hickman train, feeding the Hickman fire, the X-Men fire, and, I realize, probably not a lot of people in the store want to hear me talk about this as much as I want to talk about it. I had to call Jeff after one issue because no one's giving me the cookie I want. Someone's got to think that this is as amazing as I do. So,
and that's also the thing is it's been 5 weeks now. I can't just tell people, yep, that's the best thing in the world still, because then I'm just I feel like I'm just shouting this kind of ridiculous thing,
right?
This exaggerated opinion at people.
People got to walk in and be like, yeah, Jeff and Justin's favorite book is probably this.
Look at the staff pigs again.
Yeah. Another thing, on the other side of that, I feel weird, it only being 5 weeks, and me saying it's one of my favorite comics of all time. Yeah. That, I've said that, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm a cartoon. I'm a fucking joke. So but nonetheless.
In the stead of, summarizing all of these issues, let's not do that. The first 5 are out. We've talked about a number of them on the podcast. We're definitely going to be talking about what happens in them, but there's not going to be an intentional sort of trying to summarize them. But Justin, you've just said it's one of your favorite books of all time. I would agree. One of my favorite books of all time. That's a crazy thing to be able to say. Why are we saying that?
It is so good. Aaron had even brought up, I haven't heard you talk about a monthly comic like this in a very, she's like, I can't remember though. She said Mr. Miracle, Grass Kings was kind of like this, but she said, this reminds me of when we first met, and I was probably reading East to West and
Grant Morrison's Batman stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, just she's never been around an ongoing book that I've been this obsessed with.
Well, it's been a long time since I've had a series put 5 issues out that I'm this excited. Mr. Miracle is the closest.
Right.
That was kind of a different journey though. That was a little bit more of an introspective, where is this going? Trying to I don't know. It's very different. I loved it in a different way. This is unequivocally will be one of my favorite comics of all time, almost halfway through it.
Right. I can't quite pin down, I don't know the words to describe the books that are like this to me, but I know it when I read it and feel it. Mm-hmm. And this is that kind of caliber of a book. Mr. Miracle is a different thing. I like it for different reasons, and I think it's very, very good. But this is I don't think this is Eisner winning stuff, right? But
yeah,
in that weird.
Yeah. I don't think it's the kind of thing that Eisner Award people nominate, but I think that it is. The highest caliber big 2 book to come out in an ongoing capacity in years and years.
Same. I don't know if it is talking about things that books need to talk about to get nominated for awards, but I think it's one of the finest examples of comic booking. The art of comic booking, the craft of it is, and just storytelling. It is so imaginative, and that's why I wanted to talk about it. Is just it's so creative and far-reaching, and just his mind works in a way that only Hickman minds work.
It's a good one too.
It's it's like reading. What I imagine is it feels like reading Alan Moore back when Alan Moore was a newer voice. When people it was there's all these other voices that are distinct and unique, but there's this one voice that's a little bit louder and brighter than when people first read Alan Moore, it kind of changed the game a little bit. And I feel like that's kind of what Hickman feels like to me. It's there's no one else that's doing what Hickman's doing in comics.
What, like, before this had come out, when he was describing the series, he was saying that it's 2 6-issue series that will come out alternatingly, and each time you read an issue, it's going to change the way you view the issues before it and the way that you will read the subsequent ones. And that is really true. I actually, I was so excited to do this, and I know that you had read all these a lot. I sat down and read all of them in one go today.
Nice.
Which I had read each of them several times, but this is the first time I just went like block, like bam, and I looked like a crazy person. I had like the time chart from House of X #2 like out, and I was comparing all these things on it, and it's all internally consistent, but I'm able to enjoy it. But issue 1 of Powers of 10 is very different now, having read Powers of 10 #3. And yeah, so Powers of 10 #3 is kind of the closing of the first act.
Right.
And a big, I guess he describes it as retcon, happens at the end of this issue. And so
What do you mean by...
So I just
because it closes that future timeline?
Well, so when there was the allegations of like plagiarism,
right,
which I just ignored that whole thing, but today, for the sake of this, I sought out what his response to it was, and his response to it was so perfect. Right. He was just like, "Oh, bummer that's coming out at all." And then he was just like, yeah, I mean, if it's plagiarizing anything, it's plagiarizing this different book here. And he just straight up says why. Like, you know, in that book that you're accusing me of plagiarizing, which I did read in 2016, he made a quote of. Yeah. He's like, you know, it's reincarnation, you know, doing a same lifespan. So I can understand that, but it's much more like this thing. So he kind of like threw himself under the bus with this other thing. Like, if you want to say that, you know, referencing an idea at all is plagiarism, then I'm more plagiarizing this thing. Right. And then he says, like, but ultimately, and what you had said, that he had said, which was that idea of, like, this is just a mechanic. Like, this is just a storytelling element to get a thing done. And he described it as that storytelling element is just a mechanism to have the big retcon at the end of the first act make sense.
Right.
And I think what that retcon is, well, so the big mystery cool thing that happens is, as you're reading Powers of 10 1 and 2, you're sort of thinking that the future of this House of X world that they're setting up is this 100-year in the future, 1,000-year in the future, and that's actually the future of a different timeline. That's the future of Moira's 9th life,
right?
And it therefore is not 1,000 and 100 years in the future of the House of X storyline they're setting up,
right?
Which is just so fucking awesome.
So, and I wanted to ask you this, because this is the conclusion I came to after I read the most Powers of It. Is Charles and Moira are conceiving of every possible fallout of what could take down Krakoa, right? And so they use this 9 life to where Nimrod does come online and are finding a strategy to beat Nimrod before it ever happens. So in case, like, they're plunging an alternate timeline, like, we thought it was this definite future. This is the end result of their big success.
The seeds planted in House of X #1.
Right. And it's almost like that is just a backup plan, because they know Nimrod's a huge threat. They know the machines are a huge threat. And it's almost like they did this life, had her, the whole impetus of issue 3 is that we do find, in spoilers, we find out that Moira is alive in that world, and they're stealing some data of how to, when Nimrod goes online.
Yeah.
So they're almost like going in an alternate future where everything is super bad, so they can figure out Nimrod's, like, operating system.
Yeah, so
is that a preventative measure? Because that's my read on it, is like, oh, Nimrod is going to be a huge threat, because Nimrod always is.
So, and I love getting to talk to you about it, because I don't have a definite idea of what's going on here, and each issue has sort of changed my understanding of what's going on here. My current understanding is that there's this historical inevitability, and it is that technology and artificial intelligence will rise regardless of what the mutants or Moira does. There were always going to be Sentinels, which she kills all the Trasks, and it still happens.
Right.
And
the ultimate threat of the mutants will always be machines.
Right, and that's always going to happen. And Nimrod is the most extreme case of that. Right. And there hasn't really been specific origins for Nimrod, as far as I know. I think that he first appeared in Days of Future Past,
Right.
and then goes back in time. I was reading about that today. But
we know that Nimrod is like a big threat to the mutants
Right.
historically, right? Like
Yeah.
we all
and Nimrod. So what we had in House of X, when that mother mold is the satellite thing, what they now So Powers of 10 is the story of them getting the data to send back in time.
Right.
And House of X is them, like, what they do with that data.
right.
And
So yeah, that's kind of what I was saying.
Right,
is
right,
I
right,
think
right.
that it's like a contingency plan. They lived out this entire dismal, terrible future. Like, that's how committed Charles. That's just the big mind blowing thing is Charles is so committed to this House of X plan that he's willing to live out this crazy future through Moira to have kind of a contingency plan in case Nimrod comes online.
And I think that maybe it's I think it's less Moira and Charles and more this whole thing was Moira and Apocalypse.
Right.
And
But
it has a thing in here that, like, Moira and Apocalypse create this whole plan to do all of that.
right. But I feel like she was
Formally plan to eliminate Nimrod, because I think in every reality Nimrod is sort of the absolute evil.
Right.
So now this was all to gather that information of when does Nimrod become online, like when is the seeds of that, and it is that Orcus thing from House of X #1.
Right.
So now they know what Orcus is, so they can take it down to hopefully end the inevitability of all of that.
to remove machines as a threat, right? But when Charles and Magneto have that conversation, and Magneto's like, "Well, if I'm going to do this
Right.
with you, like, you better be flawless, and like, you better not stay my hand if I need to do something,"
Which is so awesome.
which is so cool. And Charles says, "Don't worry, we have a plan."
Yeah.
So I think Charles is like, him and Moira have looked at all possible fallouts of how the mutants can how they get extinct.
Yeah.
So when they're doing whatever Charles with his helmet on, whatever House of X is, I almost feel like Powers of X is just one of the ways it could have failed.
Yeah.
The events in Powers of X with Apocalypse and stuff. So they're like, they have this like super big meta game.
And so like the House of X stuff happens in Life 10, and the Apocalypse world was Life 9.
Right.
So that I think the whole Powers of 10 thing is all before Charles knows stuff.
But aren't they getting the data for Charles? Because they're like, go to the satellite and kill this thing, because that's when we would believe that Nimrod goes online is from this.
Right, in the House of X timeline. Yeah.
He's talking to Scott.
Yeah.
And so I read that as, and I like, this is just my speculative theory, is like that insight, that data that they have is from the Ninth Life.
Yeah,
future timeline.
For sure, and that's what happens at the end of this one. Is they keep Moira alive for long enough that they know everything about Nimrod, and then they kill her and send her back to the 10th Life. And then in the 10th Life, that's when she meets Charles. But here's the crazy thing: in the 10th Life, she meets Charles at age 17. Mm-hmm. That moment where they go and talk to to Magneto.
Right.
That is. Oh, gosh. 26 years after she meets Charles. Moira meets Xavier year 17, and then they go and recruit Magneto in year 43.
So what?
And in that time, what's crazy is that Moira, who is Moira Kindros, is her. I scoured all of them. The only time her last name is ever mentioned is at the Born moment on the timeline. She becomes Moira McTaggart at age 25, so 7 years after she meets Xavier, which stands consistent because when they go talk to Magneto, he calls her Moira McTaggart. So like they jested on this plan for 26 years, so yeah, they probably are envisioning every possibility. So here's my crazy theory.
Right.
So we don't know anything about the 6th Life. And in the second timeline that we were given in Powers of 10 number 3, there's this giant line that divides all of the timelines at this same point, and there's a squiggly line in where Life 6 is.
Right.
I think something to the effect of this chimera. Oh, the chimera that is... I'll have to edit out this weird silence. But the chimera that is captured, not Cardinal.
The Black Brain?
Yeah, the Black Brain.
Yeah.
I think that she has some Moira McTaggart DNA in her.
Oh.
And which is why she is still alive 1,000 years in the... Like, it's interesting that they've kept this person alive for 1,000 years, kind of nearing the end of time.
Right.
And I think that something about... They've taken the mutant power that Moira had, maybe cloned her, and now when this one gets to the end of year 1000, it'll get reincarnated right after the moment she was cloned from Moira, so Moira will still be alive, so then she'll be able to take information back, like that. And that is bolstered by the fact that, like, these little data glyphs on the title pages and all this business, it says... the title, this is what you do, and then it says end 09. So at the first page of this, it says it's the illusion that we're in some sort of database, and this is chronicling the 9th life. And even at the first page, it's saying this is how the 9th life ends, end of 09. And at the end of that timeline, it shows Moira X and then 06. So like there's the larger brackets of saying _06.
Right.
Which to me says that like maybe somehow all of this is still existing within the 10th life or the 6th life.
Right.
So like maybe they cloned 6th life and then like went to a different timeline, and that one hasn't looped back yet because there's like a tributary. That was what I was thinking today.
Yeah,
which is all that to say, like I still don't know what is going on.
Well, I didn't put together the idea that the Black Brain could be Moira, but I was like, why did they keep... They told us, Nimrod said, we're going to, like, delete, like, the essence of who you ever were.
Right.
But then we see a panel later, she's still alive in that stasis tank.
Slowly. And it said, because at that same time he says, like, it could take a couple of days, but it could take a couple of years to break her down into the sort of genetic data goo. And it still hasn't happened over 1,000 years. But it just, to me, it feels like, why would they include the fact that in the 100 years in the future, there's also this thing that is now still alive 1,000 years in the future that we don't quite know who they are.
Right.
Another interesting thing I found on this read through was that Magneto, green suit Magneto,
is Pulsar.
Yeah, Polaris.
Yeah, Polaris.
And Emma Frost.
Right.
Genetics, but it's got a Magneto costume because it's the son of the daughter of Magneto.
Right.
So I was thinking it was Magneto, but it's not.
Right. And Polaris has a very similar power set, so it's like a male Polaris.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
But yeah, the Silo Bell is that one.
Right.
And she's a product of... There were the mutant run pits, like genetic cloning pits, but there was also then one going on Earth run by the machines.
Right.
And those are the Hounds. So there was 2 fake mutants being produced, some by Mutants Sinister, and then, by... What's his name? Nimrod.
And there's this...
I'm just trying to, like... throw, like, what do you know? What are the pieces that I know? Let's throw all this stuff on because I don't know, but we got to get all these data points onto a table.
The House
so we
of
can
X
start
puzzle.
Yeah.
These are... The Silobel is part of the breed that is genetically predisposed to betray people.
Right.
Do we think that gene comes from Moira and she's going to betray Charles? Because isn't she historically like they have often... I thought they were old lovers. They're not.
They're not?
No, they're like, she was married to whoever in one of her alternate life. She's married to someone.
Yeah.
And who has that other villain as a son, Proteus.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, that's historically who she was. Roman was like, oh yeah, it's Charles's old flame. But then we looked up Charles's list of girlfriends Charles had in history, and Moira's not on there.
Interesting.
So I wonder, and they've had an off again, on again, whatever their relationship is. I wonder if
No, that's a really smart idea, because in here it does say that the betrayal happened, there you go, specifically, but as vaguely as it was basically a bad seed. Like there was a corrupted, stock data thing. And I think that Moira is something like there's a lack of full, wholehearted trust with Moira.
Right,
me.
for sure. Same here. And
where is that?
she sides with Apocalypse. And she's coming back to Charles, and she's almost like using Charles, because obviously you would have a pretty distorted view of reality if you have all these lives and stuff.
Right.
But like I feel like the betrayal gene, if your theory, your data point is correct, in that Cyobel has some remnant of Moira,
or just the power, just
right.
the mutant power to reincarnate.
Right, but I wonder if seated in that is
right.
the betrayal.
Yeah. And I can't find that fucking thing.
Okay. Well, here's another question,
yeah.
And I guess I would like to extend this to everyone in the store. What is House of X? Like, what do we know what they're doing? Like, they've seceded from the world.
Yeah.
They have made an offer of these 3 miracle drugs as like a, please don't fuck with us.
Yeah, here's a bribe, leave us alone.
Right.
We'll help
Why
you
incorporate Magneto? Just so Magneto wouldn't betray them, obviously. But what is their ultimate end game? Just to live in peace on this perfect island? Why have portals?
Yeah.
I'm trying to wonder, what is their goal? Are they trying to prevent?
Right.
Like, are they going to try to kill off all machines? Are they trying to prevent the ascension?
I think that what Moira's number of lives has confirmed is that machines always kill them.
Right.
And whether it was from Days of Future Past, which was her 3rd life, or whether it was like life 5, where she and Charles make the perfect city that the Sentinels come and destroy.
Right.
Yeah, that was 5, because then 6 is a mystery, and 7 is when she hunts them all down, and then they still come online and kill her. So I think that they are saying that, Nimrod is,
right.
To quote DC. And they have to end that. So it seems like a combination of doing the thing where they're having a village that is their own, or a continent that is their own, while also hoping to seed off, to head off this technology thing, ultimately make a reality where Nimrod doesn't come online. That's my assumption right now, but it does, we don't have the pieces. You're exactly right. That's a great point. We don't know what the intentions are.
Yeah, we know that and Charles is not. I don't go as far as to say it's not Charles. Like some people say it's secretly the Maker. I've seen that theory online.
Right.
I think that it is some form of Charles, like another version of Charles or something, but he is acting more radical than Charles historically has acted, from my understanding.
Definitely. And what I think is further interesting there is they are labeling this House of X. Okay, so you know how there's year 0, year 1, year 10, year 10, year 100, 1,000? I don't think that those are literal time measurements.
Right.
Because when Moira and Charles go to talk to Magneto on the island, it still says year 1, but it's been 26 years.
Right.
In that moment. So I think that those are actually kind of more exemplifying an epoch, the basic, then the year 10 is the starting of the House of X.
Right.
The year 100. So actually I think the timelines, the years itself, are probably pretty loose.
Do you think it's the birth date of the conception of the House of X? Like that year 1 is when they first came up with it, when they first met, that would have been the birth of the idea.
Right.
And then year 10 they would have gotten Magneto on it.
Yeah, but I think that year 10 they have labeled as... Oh, God. I'm just juggling all these comics around. Year 10 is is the House of X start. That's when they've got the helmet and he shows up. So it's been...
26
year 52. Years. So 52 minus 27, 37, 40. It's been 35 years until year 1 or year 10 starts.
Right. So they have to be kind of epochs rather than literal years.
But I was going through it thinking this is the mistake Hickman made. These don't make sense. But it's not true. But also that mistake just comes from me trying to assume that I know at any point which timeline that we're in.
Right.
And that's the big thing, is that we don't know what timelines
we're in. Right.
Right. We
assume that we're in 10 sometimes. Right.
Yeah, and And I'm pretty... Yeah, because it does say, like, House of X starts in year 52 of Life 10.
Right.
And
they've never tried House of X before, right?
No.
Okay.
And they also... Jonathan Hickman went so far when House of X number 2 came out to make sure and distinguish that year 49 and year 50's info thing. It says year 49, genocide of Genosha. Year 50, Moira fakes death. He said that those were backwards.
Okay.
And he said that's backwards because we all know that she fakes her death in Uncanny X-Men issue blank. And then the genocide happens in an issue after that.
Oh, okay.
So that says that the comic continuity that we know and understand is Life 10 for him to have said that these dates are contingent on these issues to have come out. So, like, I was thinking that Life 5 or Life 4 was our reality because it shows the, like, Avengers vs. X-Men when they all have the Phoenix and it shows Days of Future Past at the end. But I think that was just sort of an inclusion for, like, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We all know this continuity.
Right.
I think the assumption is that we're all in 10. But here's the other thing. Year 5, year 43 of year 5, Moira is injured in a Sentinel attack, and she goes into a coma for a full year, and then there's the genocide. So that's the one where they start that commune group.
Right.
And then in this last one that just came out, that same period is denoted by her having a concussion or being in a coma there. Mm-hmm. I think something significant happens there.
Right.
These ... lines seem to indicate that I'm going to fill it in, right? Like,
right.
Because then he did fill it in.
And then this looks like a heartbeat.
Yeah, it does. It's like a heartbeat thing.
Yeah. Heart monitor thing.
So I don't know. It's just, but each issue we get, I get more excited about, like, understanding a bigger, different thing, but it makes me realize I didn't know anything the issue beforehand.
Right, and it's interesting that you said that he, like, said each issue reframes everything, because that's literally, like, the Ascension thing I thought was just kind of vague Doom thing, and then he has this crazy farce, like, trying to skip not just human, machine, mutant evolution, but, like, these species of even higher consciousness.
Yeah.
Like, we're dealing with, like, beings that lifetimes are entire galaxies, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
In that world mind description that he puts out about, like, the hierarchy of intelligence and sophistication of living things. But yeah, I think the world mind, or even the intelligence, which is the third level, or maybe it's the fourth one, but they're saying that, like, their time is galaxies and life, like,
and so
lifetime.
The machines in year 1000 are playing a different game than even the humans and mutants are playing, right? Like,
right, and we don't even know what's really going on in that time frame.
I feel like they are manipulating that Technarch thing, so they can skip ahead a step in evolution, so they can, and I think they want to become the ultimate intelligence of the universe. And so they're being assimilated by this higher because what that higher consciousness does is, if you're worthy, if you're, like, good enough resources, it will assimilate you.
It brings you into the phalanx.
Right. And I think they're trying to take control of the phalanx.
I think so too.
And be this dominant super being, and thus be kind of spread the machine empire everywhere. And so what they're doing is the Ascension is them forcing it to assimilate it. And that's why you see in that one glyph, like, them skipping a step and if you read the evolutionary chain, there's it's the next up.
Yeah, right here.
They're trying to use this thing to skip this phase so they can go straight to, like, taking over everything.
I think that they already achieved that, and that's what it says. Nimbus achieved world mind status 10 years after impact.
Right. Is World Mind the highest?
No, it's below Phalanx.
Oh, okay.
I interpreted that line as to say that these things are intrinsically related because this thing goes out and makes other things that.
Okay,
Like, it recruits them. But I absolutely agree that I think that they're trying to, like, once they get brought into the thing, they'll corrupt the overall data.
Right. And that's what that little Nimrod wants.
Yeah.
Nimrod.
The Greater.
The Greater,
yeah. Okay, Eric, thanks for being here. This is a bad recording situation with a bad recording device because it's Django's. Eric, I got a question on our podcast about some seminal X-Men runs to read for people who are maybe getting hyped on this Hickman stuff. And my first immediate thought was Eric Cranbrink knows more about X-Men continuity and history than anyone I know. What are a couple X-Men runs that aren't like the obvious Dark Phoenix that you would recommend people read, just maybe as big moments of the X-Men history or some of your favorite stories? What do you think? I feel like you've done it all. We've talked about you at length on the podcast before as well, Eric, so I hope you're flattered.
I am. Probably the three that come to mind is obviously Mutant Massacre, which surprisingly enough involves not only all the X titles at the time, which I think there was like 3 New Mutants, X Factor, and Uncanny X-Men. It also involved Thor.
Good.
And Power Pack.
As you do. And what was Mutant Massacre about?
It was basically Mr. Sinister decided, you know what? I'm going to go off and I'm going to kill all the Morlocks, which were introduced back in Uncanny 167. So he waited about 40 issues before he said, you know what? These guys suck. Let's kill them all. And they did. And then it isn't until they keep mentioning throughout every once in a while, Mr. Sinister, Mr. Sinister. Well, he doesn't actually show up until after the Mutant Massacre in Uncanny X-Men 221. But still, a lot of bad shit happens. And I'm like, because that's when I was a teenager, I knew about the X-Men because of, such issues as 121, first appearance of Alpha Flight, and a lot of other issues too during the Brood War. And so you pick up 210, and it introduces the Marauders a little bit, and then you jump into 211, where all my favorite characters, all 3 of them, Colossus, Nightcrawler, and Shadowcat, get messed up. I mean, Marauders say, hey, you know what? You guys are pretty cool, but you know what? We're just going to fuck you up for a while.
Okay, so Mutant Massacre. What's the second one?
That would be involves a few more titles, but the Messiah Complex.
Okay, Messiah Complex. I have not read that one either.
That was coming out right about the same time as the Sinestro Corps War.
Oh.
When Jeff Johns decided, you know what, let's really make Green Lantern kick ass.
So that was pretty recently. Well, I mean, within the last 15 years.
Within the last 15 years. And both DC and Marvel, in my opinion, that's how you do a crossover, because it involved it was a really big story, but it involved Uncanny X-Men, New X-Men, which was a team group at the time.
Like X-Force.
X-Force. They introduced X-Force and Peter David's X Factor. And all of them, the whole story, just from start to finish, just flowed.
Okay. And now that we've got a bunch of people coming in the store, what's the third run?
Although I'm not I'm a fan of it, but not the biggest fan. Grant Morrison's run on X-Men. He introduced a lot of new characters that just stuck.
Phantom X, I'm looking at you.
Phantom X.
Kid Omega.
Kid Omega. That's the one that he was able to... that Marvel Universe has got the most mileage of.
Yeah.
Because Kid Omega showed up in, of course, the new X-Men run from Morrison. He also showed up in West Coast Avengers, which was hilarious. Yeah, which was hilarious if nobody ever read that.
Eric, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for letting me put you on the spot. This is the guy who everyone has heard is responsible for me working here. So thanks, Eric. You rule. I don't know. Problem, I'll toss this on at the end of the next episode of the podcast.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah.
Dino, thank you for being here with me on the Perfectly Acceptable podcast.
You are welcome, Jeff.
Sequestered in the back of the comic shop.
With a Minotaur.
With a Minotaur, exactly.
That's has nipples pierced.
Yeah, that's gonna not make sense to anybody on here. But we do have a new Minotaur poster by the bathrooms. Okay, so Dino, we got a question from a listener, and I've been waiting to talk to a couple people who I consider to be X-Men experts. Expert pun. And since you're no stranger to this podcast, I wanted to ask you, because you're one of the two most knowledgeable X-Men people I know. Josh McCormick wrote in and asked, what are some, 3 overlooked or not super talked about X-Men runs that you think are important or should be read or should be, looked at more? Just the whole Hickman X-Men run has been awesome. We're loving it. So, as an X-Men veteran, as an ex-veteran, impart some knowledge. What are a couple runs, a couple stories that you think everyone should read if they want to know more about the X-Men?
Okay. I don't know if it counts as X-Men, but it's an X-Men spin-off.
I like it.
The Kyle and Yost X-Force series. Yes. I think it's 27, 28 issues worth back in the mid-2000s with X-23, Domino, and Wolverine all on the team.
I know that one has a paperback
really
called Sex and Violence.
Yeah, that's a 3-issue mini that's kind of a spin-off of the spin-off.
So, always has interested me, but I have not read it. So, the Kyle and Yost X-Force run.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. Of course, as you guys know, I'm partial to X-23, so... and Domino, and Logan.
Yeah. So,
it was win-win-win for me. Everybody else may hate it. I don't know.
It's got cool art, too.
Yeah. If you want, 90s fun, the Onslaught crossover is insane. And it even brings in, Captain America and a bunch of the Avengers and stuff like that. Because they actually need, the quote-unquote non-mutant heroes to help them out towards the end of that.
Man, Onslaught...
It's a massive crossover, though. So
fascinated me as a kid, but I could never find the issues or got to read it. But
I think there's a trade that has most of the stuff.
What happened with that? Magneto in Charles's consciousness?
Spoil it?
Yeah. Tell me what that was.
So basically, you have Magneto and somehow Charles amalgamated into this big, giant Magneto-looking thing. Yeah. Which was Onslaught.
Cool character design.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you want your 90s craziness, that's a fun one.
We like our 90s. And then number 3 of 3.
I love the Generation X run from the 90s that Scott Lobdell and Chris Bachalo, is that how you say it?
Yeah, sure.
Bachalo?
Yeah,
I don't know.
That guy.
They created, it's really fun, because you see Emma Frost actually kind of nice-ish, and then... Banshee, Sean Cassidy, they're the two founders of the school. And then you have Jubilee and a bunch of newer mutants, at least at the time.
Okay.
That one's kind of fun, and that one went on forever. I think it was 70 issues.
Yeah, no, it's
so.
super long.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're a big fan of that one.
Yeah, but I do like Jubilee a lot. So
well, I know that you're partial to Jubilee as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so X-Force, Generation X, and the Onslaught arc are 3 X-Men stories that you enjoy a lot and you think that people who want to discover more about the X-Men should check out.
Yeah, they're just kind of fun.
Yeah. Dino, you rule. Thanks so much for being on the podcast.
It was my pleasure.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah, I the first time in reading Powers of X #2, this double-page thread about the Nimbus takes place right when we are revealed that Apocalypse is around, and then it goes to the Year 1000 crew. And I thought this was Year 100 crew, but in reading it today, I was like, oh no, this is Year 1000 crew.
And this whole thing is crazy, too.
Yeah, and
it's brilliant.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I almost think that the 2 infographics could have been switched, and that would have maybe helped, because if you could learn what World Mind status and intelligence and phalanx was, it might help the clarity of understanding that Year 1000 crew made a supreme intelligence that then went out and turned an ice giant into a world mind, and then that recruited the phalanx.
Yeah, they are using that ice giant as a way to seed, again, that fitting as much data into a small space
Yeah.
because they're trying to raise the intelligence of this like global consciousness, which makes me feel like Moira is important. Like, if we're trying to get as much intelligence into a small object, be it planet, entire race, Moira can fit infinite amount of lives in it and become infinitely more intelligent based off how many times she dies. Is there a way to actually kill her?
Yeah, to kill her before she's 12.
Right,
Because
before the gene goes.
Yeah, exactly.
So, assuming she never dies before she's 12, she could kind of become unlimitedly intelligent. So I
Right.
feel like Moira is kind of the key to the ascension. Like, it's a way to infinitely store data, because they're trying to raise like the general collective consciousness intelligence to a certain level. So Phalanx is like interested in them. 'Cause
Right,
apparently,
right.
like, Phalanx only takes on things that's worth the
Right.
assimilation of data.
Right.
So I feel like Moira is, and maybe she's the black brain in this future. Like, that's a clone of her.
Or like, yeah. Another thing that occurred to me it was cool to read them all just once in
really
a
wanna
run.
do that as well.
And one thing that became clear is the metaphor comes up over and over again. The idea of a thing being blind to things that it is the same as. So in the first issue, the Black Krakoan seed is the one that creates a space that Krakoa doesn't know is there.
Right.
The Technarch works for the Phalanx, but doesn't realize it's a part of the Phalanx.
And doesn't know of other techniques.
Right. And Silo Bell, I think it was either Silo Bell or the one who died immediately, Percival, has the ability to make them, like mutants, be blind to other mutants.
Right.
And then Moira McTaggart herself, because like when Destiny's trying to read her, she's like, "You're just a black hole. Like you're a blind space that I can't see because you are limited." It was just weird enough to have like 5 instances where there's like
are mutant and machine the same thing?
Yeah, or what? Yeah, or the idea of just like, what does it mean to like, what is sophistication involved, like to be able to be unrecognizable from oneself, or is there an advantage to be blind? I don't know. There was
maybe that's the kind of error in it all, is you become intelligent enough that you stop recognizing other forms of intelligence. That is why mutants and humans can never get along. That's why machine, mutant, and human, like, you can't see that each other are fundamentally the same being, you know.
Yeah,
like
I'm excited to see how that, you know, takes light of.
For sure. Poor humans, man. Like, we're looking at all these lives, and it's like, okay, well, mutants get fucked by the machines, but like mutants are way better off than humans. Like, humans like are these pitiful, like, little creatures on this huge scale. Like, it seems like mutants are tiny compared to this overall plan of the machines. Mm-hmm. And they're the biggest threat that the machines have. Like, the machines want to wipe out the mutants.
Right.
And humans are just such a pathetic thing that, like, oh, we'll use them, whatever. Like,
and then this new issue, like, I love that there's the Church of Ascension, which is basically humans worship the machine, and they view machine as God, and they're trying to introduce technology into their bodies to just be a part of them.
Right.
You know, like, that's what the crew blows up on, is that Church of Ascension stuff. And yeah, they're exactly, like you said, they're pitiful.
Yeah, I was thinking, you know, some people say that Jonathan Hickman's kind of nihilistic, and I'm like, well, yeah, I guess he is, because fuck, like, in this book, the opinion and view of humans are very, very, very low. Like, they don't have much of you know, we're rooting for the mutants in this context over the machines.
Right.
And Hickman, all of his body of work, seeing it as one coherent thing, utilizes technology a lot. Like, it's a very high-tech, he's a very science fiction.
Yeah.
I've never got such an anti-technology, like, vibe from his other work. This, like, it feels like Philip K. Dick. Like, the machines are this, like, ultimate inevitable thing that destroys all and takes over all. And I, as a guy who is kind of a weird paranoid person about AI, and, like, I don't like how much I rely on technology and think that there are organic parts of humanity that can never be replaced by machine, and that technology is ultimately a deviation of evolution, not
Right. They're not the
next
extension
step
of actually. Yeah.
And I feel like we're seeing like mutanthood, or they're the competing survival of the fittest for the next evolution of this galactic consciousness. Like, it can either come from mutanthood or machinehood, and right now machinehood's winning because they're like ruthless as fuck.
Right.
But I don't know, I've never gotten such an anti-technology vibe, and there's a part of me that kind of gets a sick satisfaction. I'm like, fuck the machines.
No,
I hate them.
I'm with it, and I do totally agree. Like, he's such a techno sci-fi writer, but I also would agree that, he is a kind of nihilistic writer. But like Manhattan Project and Pax Romana are both kind of stories where like technology didn't necessarily wasn't good. Like, we went back in time to fix a thing and it made just everything worse. And
Right. I'm just trying to think of, like, I guess in my mind he was a pro technology guy, kind of like Warren Ellis is. Like, is very into what technology can do for us, but maybe I've just maybe he's blatantly like anti-technology and I've just never noticed, because this book to me feels very like relish in the real. Like, the most important parts of this are the conversation between Charles and Moira.
right.
It exists in the human domain, or I guess the mutant domain, but in like personal interaction. And he says that this is going to become a more character-centric book. And kind of the ultimate evil of this book is not only technology, but like technology unchecked.
Yeah.
Like, allowing it to take on, it almost feels like a big red, like, it almost feels like a very, if we were to bring it into the political realm, it almost feels like a anti AI manifesto. Like,
No, and I agree. I think that it's his work is all very sort of techno on the outside, so I think it does maybe feel pro techno. Looking at like East of West feels like a thing,
but again, that's a techno apocalypse.
Exactly. Yeah.
He's just got a very like high tech looking aesthetic, and his writing is so cerebral that it feels machine like at some points. Like, he's this calculating super architect,
right?
That sometimes I think that like maybe he's just very into machinehood and writing. But now reading this book, I'm like, the most powerful thing that we rely on is, I guess, us as mutants, because that's who we're kind of empathetically supposed to want to be and want to root for. Their biggest strength is an organic thing. It's this living island in this like living technology versus this like plant technology versus machine technology, right? And
one's based on intervention, whereas the other is sort of the natural,
right?
But yeah, I guess natural is. So what are some of your other favorite things in these books? One thing I noticed with Powers of 10 #3 is that, just as small, not story stuff, but the artist, I think what he's doing is he's taking ink on his fingerprints or thumbprints and putting them onto a screen and then digitally blowing them up and then using that as shading, which I think is really cool.
Me too. I noticed it specifically with Wolverine and then went and looked back. Like, I've seen fingerprint techniques before, but like this...
Sean Murphy does it a lot, but never sort of like digitally extracted and then blown up.
Right. It's such a cool texturing effect.
Yeah. And now I'm wondering if maybe he's using it right there because Wolverine had his shit wrecked and his skin is recovering.
Right.
Maybe, but...
Yeah. Got
sorry.
Blowed up.
Yeah, I love that Cypher in House of X #1 had like sort of created this relationship with Krakoa.
Right.
And then Krakoa became Cypher.
Right.
And now Cypher is dead, but the body lives on as Krakoa. So he's the, like, I really like that. And interestingly connected to that is that this Krakoa is, from Life 9. Life 10 is the reality where they're taking the seeds and creating the gateways and everything. So it's actually like not the same being, but it was a really easy logical assumption to sort of think that he is the lived out version of the island as a person, but in fact they're parallel things.
Right. Yeah, I just assumed that he was like a seed of the island. Like he is from that direct island, but it's a different life.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot I really like. I've never seen a book with further reaching like implications as far as like how this. I've never seen a scope on this level. Like
Yeah.
and there are a lot of very long comic book runs with an ending and a beginning in mind, and like there are many terrific comic book runs where when you read the last issue you see that it was seeded pretty early
Right.
on. But I've never been able to watch it happen. I'm like, holy fuck, this guy can write 1,000 issues from this. There's so much going on.
Right.
And there are so many creative ideas that are just throwaways, or maybe not, because he's a super intentional, meticulous writer. Like, the idea that you would take a planet and seed it full of technology and send it through space, and then it starts assimilating other planets to become this bigger, massive mass. Like, that is a Grant Morrison level idea, and it's just like one thing to get us to another thing. Like,
That's what a story would be based upon if it were a different writer. This
Right.
is just a small part.
right, another, like, I've never seen him use such just straight up imaginative ideas, like living planet seed technology, like it's really imaginative. And I love some of the character concepts. Like, some of the character designs are so
Yeah.
fucking cool. Like Rasputin and Cardinal and just all those characters, it made me realize reading this most recent Powers of X that those characters might not come back because that life is gone.
Right.
Like, I was like, fuck, I'm really attached to these characters because that Powers of X, it was an X-Men book that was not using the cast of familiar characters that everyone has pre-established relationships with. So I could kind of attach myself to this new set of mutants
Right.
as my mutants as a new fan.
But so check this out. The thing that they broke into Nimrod's building and stole was just a directory. It
Right.
was like a catalog of every mutant that's existed. And they
Right.
take that and they send that back in time. So theoretically, I think that's kind of how we got like Cyclops and all these mutants that are dead. I think that there's something about going back and having a director, like being able to clone or recreate
Well, and
these
that's
things.
we see Charles saying, "Rise, my mutants."
Right.
And
So, all that to say, maybe, since we're stealing a future directory where those mutants existed before it, maybe
Right.
they could be cloned or created from it in these times. Because I was thinking the same thing, like, these books are going to end, and I think that the ultimate ending of this is going to be kind of like Terminator, where, like, there was a future, and now we've prevented that future, and the future is our own.
Right.
I think that that's going to kind of be the full scope of this, is now we can start an X-Men story that we averted this reality, and it's all ours, and hopefully
Right.
there's going to be it. But I just cut you off, sorry.
Oh, no. I think that is ultimately kind of what he's doing, is cleaning up continuity and creating a continuity where he can play in it and not be tethered to every other X-Men story. I also feel like this is going to somehow create some ultimate bad guy that we've never
Yeah.
seen before, too.
I know, because we're only just over a third of the way through it.
Right.
5 of 12. Like,
Yeah. And my crazy guy theory is that all of these are clones on the House of X time, that maybe even Charles is a clone from that directory. Because he's not acting exactly like Charles.
sure.
And there's a very Garden of Eden, like, rise my children
Right.
thing. I feel like maybe what we perceive as Charles trying to start a new Genesis is completely new. Like, these are redoing mutant kind.
right.
So we're getting a new Scott, we're getting a new Jean Grey, we're getting these completely reborn beings, kind of made ex nihilo,
Right.
rather than dealing with the history. And that's why he's Charles minus what would have prevented Charles in the past to do what he needed to do. He's
Because
like a
he's
little
seen those lives.
right,
Yeah,
and he's a little more ruthless than
Right.
Charles. Letting go of his empathy is scarier than Magneto.
Yeah.
Charles, I don't know. Magneto's I've always thought of just Charles had a worse life. But if you take away the things that keep him human, he's even scarier than Magneto. Because
Yeah.
Magneto
And his
ultimately-
powers allow him to be scarier, too.
Right. Magneto ultimately, he's a terrible person and he does terrible shit, but it's from a weird, broken, empathetic standpoint. He's trying to protect his people because he went through the worst hell ever. You know, Magneto could never be Apocalypse because he does care about mutant. He does care about something, and now Charles is this incredibly powerful mind that is kind of blinded by his own shit, and that's.
And I like how in the Moira Life issue, House of X2, she basically identifies that right off the bat as like, yeah, he's really self-righteous and egotistical and has a bit of a god complex.
Right, and that's the scariest.
Right, and she says that when she was able to get below the surface of that, he's wonderful. But like, yeah, he's always been a creep. Like,
Right.
He's always been kind of a creep.
Right, and a manipulator, you know.
I love the inclusion of Apocalypse. Like I love that character, but I don't have any comic books where they're that awesome. It's just like the cartoon show and everything. And to make him this timeless, unstoppable evolutionary force, he's the Vandal Savage of the Marvel universe.
He is.
Yeah, I really like that. And I liked sort of him falling on the side of evolution and mutants. Yeah, God, the beginning of Powers of 10 #2. Oh, maybe. There's just a great Apocalypse quote from somewhere, and he's clearly talking to Moira, and it says, like, if you can withstand these trials, then I will be able to make you eternal. And it's clearly, like, the dialogue from Life 9 of him turning her into an Apocalypse person.
Right. What is terrifying to me is, like, so Apocalypse, he's like Magneto, not tethered to humankind at all. Like, he just wants to kind of bring mutanthood into utopia.
Yeah, usher in the next.
Right,
yeah,
he just does not see. Or Magneto just wants to protect and save and kind of bolster his Apocalypse just has no connection to the world. Like,
right.
He's just this evil. He's a machine, like almost. Like, that's a pretty scary thing. But the machines are even more like to see. Apocalypse have to like band together with these creatures that he thinks are below him,
right,
against the machine shows how terrifying Nimrod is. Like, that Apocalypse has had to like pull his resources to fight this thing.
Right.
It's a good way to bolster this overarching fear, cosmic fear of machinehood and AI by getting, Apocalypse is kind of the big bad of the X-Men universe.
Yeah.
And to have him kind of scramble to
be
fight,
siding with them to
it's like, oh, man,
it's House of X #2 that they put that quote of, if you can find it in you to survive, if you are worthy, then I will make you into something more than them. And like, that's very early in these 5 issues to be seeding the link between Moira and Apocalypse and her elevating to an Apocalypse being and becoming a horseman. Like, there's no way that you could know the basis for this quote as you're reading it or even after you finish this issue, and to include that there is very cool. Also, it makes a lot of sense to have had Powers of 10 #2 and 3 come out back to back. To me, in reading it this time, it became clear that House of X #3, you're going to need to know that this year 100, year 1000 future is Life 9 of Moira, and not the extension of the first reality. But I do think he needed to set that up for several issues and have us live in that before we were sort of taken from it. It's a great creative storytelling thing to do, to be like, well, I want to tell my own story, but I have to play with everyone else's toys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a future timeline so I can do anything I want with any of those, and I'm going to destroy it at the end. So people are going to be invested, but I can do whatever I want with it. And it gives stakes in an industry that historically kind of removes the magnitude of stakes.
Right. You can always see beyond the veil of the stakes that are given, and now, like, he's collapsed the stakes that we would have, like our illusionary, like, oh, but all of our characters have always been like, it's like, no, that's just another life that can be thrown away, and yeah, as far as like technical, like man behind the scenes scheming, like mechanics of story, it's also really brilliant the way he, like, just from like almost a marketing standpoint, like remaking this continuity and redoing this and giving himself with all, because I mean, I was texting Colette, like, man, I really want to go read X-Men, but I don't know what's worth it. You don't have to anymore at this point. Like, he's boiled it down to its essentials, gave you the things that are familiar enough to, oh, yes, Days of Futures Past happened, this thing happened, but also here's this whole new kind of era we can live in and work. It's like, just from like a professional standpoint of like being dropped into a universe and making it all your own, like every comic creator kind of has to do that. You know, Alan Moore did it with Swamp Thing. Warren Ellis kind of does that kind of Grant Morrison relooked at Batman as every day, like just from the tech standpoint of like giving yourself a reset is such an ingenious way to do it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I'm so, like, 6 months ago or whatever, when we found out this was happening, it was like, yeah, it's going to be an X-Men book.
Blah.
And your quote of just like, yeah, but how much of any of his books feel like, how much does Avengers Run feel like an Avengers Run? Like, this is just, a big Hickman book at this point. And I wanted to say, and got derailed immediately, but in his response to the plagiarism things, I also wanted to say that him as a man, I love that the end of all of his sort of like, he never like gets defensive, and then he just says like, and then also for anybody who has not read that book by that woman, you need like the 15 lines of, go read it because it's a fantastic book. Like he is like honorable through and through. Like he doesn't get defensive. He doesn't throw her under the bus. He says, this is a bummer. I'm not perfect. Everyone steals from stuff. Here's instances of me doing that, and this is all for the plot. Have faith in it, and go read that book, because if you like my book, you're gonna like that. Like,
right.
Just like class act.
And as well, it kind of proves this point, like, execution of ideas can be trademarked, but like ideas like reincarnation, you can't trademark reincarnation and like multiple reincarnations in a single life. Like, I've seen that other places, like, it's kind of saying that Donnie Darko is the only bifurcating time movie, like, I
mean, it's basic as like people could be saying like, he ripped off Groundhog's Day.
Right.
It's the exact same thing except for one day, a lifespan. Like,
right.
To say that anything is less because there's an idea in it that's been, like, I don't think.
Right. That's
Bill
like
Murray
saying
is bummed.
Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind got ripped off, or the person who did the 15 Lives book ripped off Eternal Sunshine, because you see variants of these people through different time frames. Cloud Atlas, that Netflix show that I just watched late to the party, Maniacs, is all these like bifurcating stories and fantasies of one single life. Like, the idea of multiple lives lived that you're not experiencing,
right,
is not an idea. Like, that's a very old idea.
Right.
Like, so, and while there are a lot of parallels, there, like, you can, it's the same basic idea, and, it looks very similar, but what I was trying to say is, in the context of the story, what he's trying to do, what he's kind of has to do of rebuilding all the continuity through these multiple lives, like, he's kind of limited. I don't know, I think it's ingenious that he used that same 15, like, reincarnation within a multiple lifetime, or one lifetime, or one person. I think the genius of it is that he used that idea in order to clean up as a way to clean the continuity. But, like, given the context of the entire story and what he has to be given, of course it's going to look the same. Like, he has all these other seeds going.
Right.
And he's redoing this entire history and he needs to have one through line of narrative. Of course it's going to be a single person with all these different lives. Like, I don't think that that's directly taking from the book, even if he read the book and was inspired by it. Like, the whole story is a completely different thing, and he's limited. Like, he has to tell this super big story, and you need some kind of way to ground that, and it's like through a single protagonist.
Right.
Like, that's not.
It's a shame that is a thing that people need to bring up. Right. Gosh. Well, that's the first 5 issues of Houses of X and Powers of 10. We don't know for sure what's going on, and I love that, because mostly stories are very similar in a lot of different ways. It's easy to feel like you know what's going on in a thing, and I just don't have that here in the best possible way.
Hickman's stuff allows you to wildly speculate. And
yeah, exactly.
As someone who's read comic books a lot, and I'm trying to do this without seeming like a dick, but like, and knowing the industry, being part of the industry also kind of stales your eyes to knowing that nothing really matters in comics, even if you're invested in the character.
Right.
Like, I have, and we all do here, we have the benefit but also the curse of reading comic books and seeing the cyclic nature of it, but also working in comic books and seeing how deaths and rebirths and relaunches and all that stuff is all a way to drive money. Mm-hmm. When you see something in a comic, for me, it's hard not to get that stale air in my mouth, like, oh, this doesn't matter. This is just one run. This is just one day, Charles Xavier will be back.
Right.
One day Superman will be back. One day Batman will come back from time and be there. Like, it is very easy from a reader standpoint and from like a marketing, working in the industry standpoint to know that it's all intangible. And this is the very first time in a long time that I've felt genuinely surprised and feel what it was like to read comics as a little kid, where there was just unlimited possibilities, and I wasn't reminded of like, oh, can Spider-Man actually come back from the dead? Like, that like ignorance is bliss has been given back to me, where I really have no idea what's going on. And it's not like I'm always able, like, I bet you I'm going to be totally wrong with this book. I'm not saying that I can predict a book every book super easily, but there is a predictable nature to reading comics if you do it long enough.
Right.
Especially the big two. Like, that ultimately they need to make more money, so Bruce Wayne will come back. Or, so this feels like, because there's such far-reaching implications that are more than just an X-Men book.
Right.
It's like, I don't know, I feel like I'm in the middle of a spider's web, and it feels good for the first time. I'm like, fuck, there's so much going on, more than just this, needing an X-Men relaunch.
So people should all read this. I don't know if it is clear or not, but we're very enthusiastic. We both love comics, and there's an amount of jaded, but we're also both still, every week I'm able to still be really excited about anything that happens, even in those cyclical stories. But this is the cream of the crop, and it is the most I've loved a comic coming out in a long time. So if you are curious on the exact plot beats of these, pick up the issues, come in and ask us. And this is just sort of us figuring it all out. The live podcast is the week of the final issue of House of X, and then it's a couple days before the final issue of this whole thing. So maybe Justin and I will do a 10-minute segment on just, masturbating to X-Men or something. But people should all check it out. And thanks for listening to us do this. Justin, do you have anything else to add in here?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, thanks for, if anyone does listen to this, like, this is purely to blow off, like, extra pressure cooker steam to let, like, I just have not been able... I have not had a book inspire my imagination so much in a really long time. Like, some people say Hickman lacks a little bit of emotional content. He's too cerebral. I would challenge some parts of that, in just like, I asked Jeff to do this because I was just like, I have yet in a long time I have not read a comic that gets my exact type of imagination going, and like, there hasn't been a book that's made me want to write again like this one. Like, I just was like, man, because stories can be unlimited and huge and big, so I just like, it's good to have, because I don't want to tell everyone about this, proselytize about it too much and silence other people by just being like, it's the best thing. So this being a good space to let off some of that extra steam, because I read it excitedly the night it comes out, and then the next day I don't read it, and then I have a day off the next day. And every Thursday I've gotten up in the morning and did a slow read of this. Like, I do a fast read to get my, like,
I do the exact same thing,
and then I do a slow read, and like, I have not enjoyed a comic of this caliber in a really long time, and I haven't loved a comic as much as I've loved this one. And like, when you have that kind of comic, you just want to talk about it and think about it as much as you can. And this book is an easy book to live inside and kind of get lost in the beauty of it.
I would say every issue's a 10 for me.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I forgot I was gonna go.
Which is crazy.
Just putting the 10s out right here. The 10 has been the big old 10 dong has been on the table the whole time.
So come in and check it out. If you don't like this, we don't really want to hear that, which is great. I know this book is not for everybody. We try to not rain on other people's parades.
Right.
Don't rain on our parade.
Yeah.
This is the most joy I've had reading comics in a long time. And
I totally get if it's not your thing.
Yeah. Oh, it is the most like a college textbook a Marvel comic has been in ever. So I get that is not everyone's picture of, entertainment.
Yeah, you don't want to feel like you're taking in data when you're reading a book or stories sometimes.
But damn I do.
Yeah, I do.
All right, Justin, thanks a ton.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff.
We'll see all y'all very soon.